again. This is LinkedIn Live, Hour of Empower. Today's word of the day is capital. Chat's open. We depend on chat to direct us and make us as relevant to whatever your needs, thoughts, or concerns might be today. Love to hear what your idea of capital is. And I know it has multiple definitions. I'm so honored today to have Kelly back and a new individual, Carl Dakin, who I've gotten to know and is in Colorado also. So with that said, before chat kind of like takes over, why don't you spend a minute or two, Carl, just kind of giving us some context and what your initial thoughts on capital, because I thought it related so well to what you've been dedicating your life to.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. I'm wearing my Capital hat to match your hat, and I what I do in my work on a daily basis is I act as what I call a capital coach. I help people design, stage, and actually manage or support capital campaigns. And this can apply to both nonprofits as well as small businesses, where I spend most of my work with innovative companies bringing new products and services to market and helping them get the funding or the capital resources they need to make that happen. I will share that one of my challenges is that every time I talk to somebody about capital, they use the word money as though it's an equal word. And money is a form of capital, but anything you can purchase with money is also capital as an asset for the operation of your business. That's people, equipment, real estate, buildings, intellectual property, your social network. All these things can be considered because when I'm out there doing a little horse swapping, trying to raise capital, I want to have all the tools available to me so I'm not limited to one form of capital.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, and capital, like I say, could be a city and a country. It could be, like you say, something financial, and it could be your worth to other people. Is how much worth do you have out there in your network and in your support? Kelly, I know you've spent a good portion of your life being very successful in financial markets. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I come and first of all, just welcome. We're so grateful to have you today. And I think, yeah, for me, right away, I went right to capital markets. I spent a majority of my career doing that, and it's such a fascinating operation. But I feel for me, the reason I love business so much in organizations, and particularly startups, there's a vibe that's in that arena that is just so different because it's always moving, shaking. And it's never boring, and that's probably why I like it so much. uh, so yeah, capital raising, and I love what you're doing for startups and businesses because I do think a lot of people, particularly because of what happened in 2020. I refer to myself as an accidental consultant because I really never intended to be one. It just happened because I was laid off. And I'm seeing a lot of other people do that, but they really do struggle with knowing who and how do I reach out to in order to help my business and to raise capital. Um, so I think that's honestly a discussion that I think will impact so many people. So those are and granted, of course, capital of a state or a country I thought of, and capital letter, um, all the things. Yeah, so I think there's so many different directions, but I think I'll be interested to hear what the audience has to say on the word, and if they have any questions um, about raising capital, because I do think there's so many misconceptions of what that actually looks like. And of course, good point of bringing up the fact of it's not just money, human capital, and I think that's even a new, pretty trendy title, right? As people are like the human capital, the chief human capital operator or whatever it's called. And I'm like, I don't know why, but that just sounds weird to me. But the human part is definitely, and I think that was what my, wasn't a quote on my post was about without uh, capital, there wouldn't be labor. Um, so, and being a Labor Day weekend, I mean, what an apropos word as well. So, Don, what are your initial
Well,
thoughts?
after both, you and Carl have kind of shared yours, I kind of feel, pretty challenged to take that to the next level. But I think to your point, Kelly, capital is usually an accentuation, making something larger, like a capital letter, right? You know, to capital labor. It's, you know, there's a lot of acquisitions that are all about just getting the people in a company.
Yeah.
Right? People will buy a company, get the top people they need, and whatever they do with the company is kind of like collateral benefit. And it's really about measuring, right? You can't manage what you can't measure. And usually capital is something you can inventory, identify, you know, put some sort of value on, because then it becomes an exchange, right? What's your capital in exchange for what other capital or different capital will make somebody feel like we created a win-win. And in a lot of cases in financial situations, the normal perspective is someone wins, someone loses, you know? But if you can trade different things to different needs, who can benefit more from getting an excess to fill maybe a deficit and vice versa, then you become a quality matchmaker, right? And I agree with Carl. You know, I've been in business situations, and sometimes they were actually mediocre ideas with great people, but they made them great situations. And I've been in great deals with some mediocre people and always dumbed down to that, because I think capital exchange, again, you can look at it from a transactional standpoint or a relationship standpoint, right? You buy a pencil, you give $1, everything's done and finished, you know, or you invest your thoughts, your ideas, your passions. Those are really, I think, the intangibles that you don't see on a balance sheet that a very thoughtful, insightful person can pick up, like you say, Kelly, the energy, the vibe. You know, there's something here. It ain't there yet, but it's coming, and the people will make it happen, you know. And some people, you know, not to dwell, but are deserving. And I remember in the older days, bankers would lend you money based on how they felt about you, how they felt your integrity was, how you were a family person or a community person. I mean, those would make a difference. But before we hand it back to our esteemed guest, Carl, let's share these wonderful people, their faces, their names. Renadav is here every day. Always, and I had a conversation with him last week from India, and he always starts with these same two comments he says, you know, every day, and then adds to it. And that's capital that he's exchanging to so many people in so many ways, and it's so easy, you know. And I think that's what's changed. Elizabeth from South Florida is here. Haven't seen in the past, but very, very happy to have you. Ashif from Toronto's here every day. Thank you, Ashif. Linda Coleman's here. Thank you, Linda. Zen is here. Zen's a new person. We'll be here on Tuesday. The vault was a phenomenal success. And John, greetings, lovely folks. Zen is right in there commenting. Social capital is more important today, it seems, especially with the diversity in the virtual space. And then Zen follows that up with, perhaps the human capital is evidence of the servant leader growth in recognizing its people who are the most important resource that edifies the use of hard and soft capital. Well put. I got to give you credit. Highly articulated. Ashif says capital is power, presence. Zen, would a win-win-win now include people, process, and planet? And you can add a couple more wins if you want, if it has the umbrella effect of supporting so much more. And John says capital is that motivation which transforms you from an italics to an A brand. That's a very, very thoughtful way of saying it. Elizabeth agrees. So now that we've got some interaction, Carl, where do you take this from here?
Well, what I like to do is make a few observations I've learned in 40 years of fundraising. And one of these is that of all the types of capital, that people, relationships is actually your most valuable asset. And I say this from a couple different perspectives. A lot of people have heard about crowdfunding. And if you break that word down into two parts, crowd plus funding, as I explain it to my clients, you can't get the funding without a crowd. And as you go through the fundraising process, the first question is, does anybody know you? Because if they don't know you, the likelihood of getting anything out of them in the form of an investment is almost zilch. So having a large network of people who know you, trust you, believe in what you believe in, that is the first point towards being successful in raising capital for any purpose, whether it's a charity or a small business or even a larger business.
Okay, that's concise and to the point, and I think it stresses the be known before you're needed mentality. Build that confidence, trust, where people actually are starting to come to you and say, "Do you got anything I can invest in? Do you got anything we can partner in?" Because they want to spend more time with you based on the benefit they're receiving. And that's a much better way of identifying value to an investor, because I've done deals that weren't the best financial deals, but had great opportunities for working with teams and people. And when I first partnered with my partner, I always talk about, I had to take a 65% pay cut to do business with them, because he said, "I'll put in the money, you're going to put in the sweat," and it reminded me of Leslie Flowers, who always does her Think and Grow Rich, is in that book. The person who wrote it was interviewing Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest person in the world, and his name was Napoleon Hill was the guy who wrote the book. And he said, "I'm going to allow you to write the premier book on success. For 3 years, you'll work. I'll introduce you to everybody like Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and you'll work for free." And he said to himself, he reached in his pocket, he had like 12 cents for the train home. And he said, "Now ask yourself, what would you do if the richest man in the world said, he's going to give you this opportunity, but you're going to have to work for free?" And he said, "It didn't take me long to think, if the richest man in the world saw something in me, that he would work with me for 3 years." And he responded, "Absolutely. When do I start?" So I think people have to realize the future. And I think that's what capital is for, is building a better future, giving people opportunities they couldn't have had. With that said, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great example. I mean, I love that. The richest man in the world offering you to help you out. Yes, please. I mean, that's like priceless, right? But it is interesting in business, because I think a lot of people do struggle with that, particularly with startups. And I'm probably going to stay in that space a little bit, only because of my background, is knowing when to take a pay cut and take equity in a company. Because a lot of times you're working a lot. It's not, and if you broke down what you were making, it's like pennies probably on the hour. But knowing really when to say that I will take an equity stake in the business, because a percentage of nothing is nothing. And it's a risk. And I think a lot of people, don't know how to value that or put value on that. And as many pitch decks as I've seen in my life for different businesses, man, some of them are such a stretch. And I'm like, I don't know where y'all made these projections up, but these are not real. But I think that's going to be an interesting thing. And like I said, I would be interested to know what some of the audience members would say. But is knowing, like with Carl's background, of those questions of like, when do I reach out? What do I need? And who do I contact? What is, basically, I guess, your ideal client, or who should be reaching out to you, Carl? And with that, I will toss it back over to you.
Sure. When I put together a capital campaign, I set aside a lot of the myths of raising capital that you might get from watching too much reality TV or listening to pitch competitions. I've found that any organization that wants to move forward, that if they succeed, there will be certain people who are going to benefit just naturally because of that success. It may be somebody in their supply chain, it may be their customers, it may be a social cause. And because they have this other benefit from success, if I ask them to invest, then they get a twofer out of the deal. So I look for these people I call stakeholders, and I try to understand how and why they're going to benefit. And that guides my entire capital campaign. Then I can go to them and go, what can I do to make this deal better? I can customize it. I can emphasize it. And these people, they're going, wow, I'm getting all this benefit. Plus I get an investment. That's a great deal for me. And so I have a lot of fun putting together packages, crafting deals where I'm trying to give them the most that they can get out of the deal, but it's all benefits the organization I'm working with.
So what's changed over 40 years, Carl?
I will tell you a lot of stuff has not changed. Invariably, any startup entrepreneur I talk to thinks that their way of raising money is to stand up on a podium in front of a lot of people they don't know, violation of rule number 1, they don't know anybody, and they make a generic offer that's a one size fits all and therefore fits no one. That's violation of rule number 2. And 3, nobody in the audience may have any motivation to help them with their project. So they're talking to no one and they're wasting their time. Statistically, angel pitching, you only have like a 2 to 3% success rate. So why would you as an entrepreneur go to the plate like a batter, in Major League Baseball and strike out 97 times out of 100 and consider that a good use of your time? So I constantly fight the battle of trying to convince people, talk to people who know you, care about you, understand what you're doing, and don't spend your time talking to people who don't know you, don't care, and may never care about what you're doing.
So how do you see using something like LinkedIn Live or social media that distinguishes and differentiates you from the crowd? Because we talked about that on the phone.
Yeah, so programs like this one allow you to find your audience, find people who share an affinity with what you're doing, who care about the same things you care about. And you reach out and build relationships with them. You follow up to the email post and comments and stuff, and you start building your own crowd. And that crowd then is like your fan base, your personal fan base. And they get behind you anytime you want to go do something. There was a quote I heard recently about, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with your own crowd. There's so much truth in that it's so important for businesses, any organization, to really understand that those relationships are really a reflection of who you are and what you're doing. And the more relationships you have, the more you're going to get accomplished.
Well, sounds great. Let me just get to more people and then we'll get right back to Kelly. Zen says, applause from the crowd comes in the dollars raised. It comes back with sweat equity often tops the chart. To that point, no one's going to invest, and money is so expensive in the early stages that if you're taking a huge paycheck, right, at the cost of having to give up equity and even control at times, and it doesn't create a lot of confidence in the people putting in the money, right? Because even when I did turnarounds, it was like, what's everybody going to sacrifice, right? Everybody's got to come to the table with something or nobody's going to come. So anyways, that's an important part. Ambimbolas, who's been here forever, she's just the greatest. Half of Nigeria follows us now because of Ambimbola. Thank you very much. Anjan, for a measly pauper, your penny don't count as capital lest he spends it on his needs via alms. A few pennies saved is his capital. And again, confidence is capital. Attitude is capital.
Yes.
Right? Because you go into the room like a wet noodle, and that's how everything around you is going to start being perceived. Agree, Kelly. Nice to hear it could happen, and more are stepping out to help others. Even our company, people help each other without expecting something back, being good people. And there are some here to Don to be proud of. Well, thank you so much. Linda's so wise and thoughtful. I took a position recently, a small stipend to participate in life-fulfilling endeavor. It seems when we do, we're supported from other directions. I think that's so true. Sheaf says they value features and benefits. Zen is great insight and wisdom. Carl makes so much sense and no sense. Ashish says captive audience. That's a good one. Elizabeth is create relationships with people. Dennis, who's our rhymer, agree it is good to relate to your relationships before it is too late. And Zen follows up with growing the connections here takes time and follows the 5 P's: patience, persistence, perseverance, passion, and purpose. So well said, Zen. I'm glad you came here today offering so much. Kelly, this is so great because it really gets deeper beyond most superficial definitions of capital. Capital almost seems like effort. Like I need money, as if like I need to do something, where you should always be open for capital.
Yeah.
It just gets priced differently based on your situation. But you need to always be in the game so that when you have to, it's not like last minute.
Mm-hmm.
Desperation doesn't sell well either.
Oh, no.
And it's also judgment. Why'd you wait so long?
Yeah.
Well, why weren't you talking before you needed it, Kelly?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, especially the desperation part. Like as an investor, you smell that stuff a mile away and are like, no, I'm tapping out. It's so interesting for so many reasons, right? Because I think people buying onto your mission, your product, your purpose, however you want to label it, that is so important. I mean, some working in startups with people who are there and enthusiastic about the goals and your mission, your vision. If you don't have buy-on from them, you really have nothing. But you're right; it's totally priceless on the human capital that you get out of it when they do believe in your vision for the company. And it's interesting because raising capital has I think a fear attached to it as well, because it's you're asking for help. And that's one of the things as human beings we do not like to do. And I've seen organizations that raise capital in the proper way. Me working in financial services for so long, we raise capital through the broker-dealer channel. So that's a whole different animal in and of itself. Different from angel investors or VC, and how you reach out to people. And the other side of that, I have seen organizations or small companies, startups, that they go out to some investors, and I'm like, wow, that is the crappiest pitch deck I've ever seen in my life. And you can tell that you need the money in order to go on. It's not even about the success. It's just about, gosh, we're going to have to close the doors or stop this dream if I don't get this money. And it just feels, your investor always feels it, because you've got to believe in what's going on. And even people that work, like I said, with me in the broker-dealer channel, our reps who would go out and deal directly with advisors, it was like, guys, they're not buying what we're selling. They're buying you, because they can go anywhere else and get another product, another Reg D. There's thousands of them. We're not anything different. So it comes back to the human capital, which I think is interesting. And I think it's probably always going to turn back around to that during this discussion, because it is about who we are and what people see and how we relate, because we invest in something that we can see ourselves in. I've got to have a connection with the human being, even if I think the product is amazing. If I don't really know you and have that relationship, like, I think that is so important. And I think and I'll take a little of a left turn here, is that's what happened with 2020 and LinkedIn, is everybody's gotten back to the fact of we've got to have a connection. It's not about numbers. It's not about the vanity numbers and how many likes I get and how many people say hi. That it's truly about, hey, how can we help one another? And those are people that we want to work with, right? It's because it's just genuine. We don't want to have that. I hate that. The pitch slap right away that comes in on LinkedIn too. People who are immediately, once we connect, they send me a pitch to buy their thing or to have a meeting to sell me their thing. And I'm like, you don't even know if I need your thing. You know nothing about what I do. And particularly when they tell me it has anything to do with marketing, or if they do say about capital markets, I'm like, people, did you even read my profile? Like, so I think it is interesting that it will all go back to the human connection and relationship. Because when you're giving money, you've got to trust who is on the other side of that. I mean, that's where, at least for me, it is. I definitely would never give my my hard-earned cash or my sweat equity to something that I don't truly believe in, because that's a big commitment. Even if you're not getting paid and it is sweat equity, um, that's a lot of time and energy. So you've got to believe in it. So those are my thoughts right now. So I will toss it back on over and get your thoughts now.
Carl?
Yeah, so I like your point about the fear of asking for money because when I work to make a pitch, the first thing I do, of course, is I talk about myself. But before I present that to whoever I'm talking to, I want to turn it around and say, I've studied who you are. I think I can help you. And you explain how the success of your organization would benefit that person, that investor candidate. And once I've explained that, and if they agree with me, then I go, oh, by the way, I could probably do more of that if I had a little extra money in my pocket. But I start the conversation with how I'm helping the person I'm talking to, and that changes the entire tone of the conversation. It's not all about me, it's about them. And if I can get that person to believe I actually can help them, then we're going to have a very good conversation. They may not write a check, but I may have a new person that's a fan of mine, and I'll take as many of those as I can get.
Well, I think to that point, the two elements that I thought were very beneficial in reducing risk and extending opportunity was due diligence
Oh yeah.
on the company looking to raise money. Most of the time, they're just thinking, can I pass muster? And what people don't understand is when the check cashes, you're stuck with who gave you the check, right? And what are they going to bring to the table or take away from the table? The other element is already have a relationship with an investment group. I always had an investment banker that was always bringing things to me, not waiting for me to say, here's what I'm looking for. And I think the other element is, again, people like doing business with people they like and trust. And once you get a relationship with somebody, the investment intermediary is your advocate, right? They only really benefit if you benefit, because if they make a bad deal, you're probably not going to use them again, right? And they're going to know and believe, hopefully, as much as you do, where you don't have to keep selling them on selling you. And it's, again, who's in control, who's on top, who's mastering their future, and weighing options, because everything has a price, everything has a time. If you wait longer, it probably costs you less, but you risk anything having a hiccup, because one thing, it's all about momentum. Where's the trend, right? If you're raising business money from a business that used to be and continues to diminish and is based on more capital assets than human potential, that's something. And an investment person may just say, if you did this and this, and now you'll reinvent yourself as this, right? Or if you dump that old division that no one likes or anything. But anyways, there's so much to it. And that's why it's so important to find somebody, like Carl, who's a good person. I always say good person first, because you can't change that afterwards. Here's I believe Dennis Agria is good to relate to your relationships. We talked about that. Danny's here. Danny comes every so often. Great guy from England. Literally just had a pitch slap while. But that's the thing. Awareness goes a long way too, and don't be ignorant. There's a lot of stuff out there you can research. You can do due diligence. I think that's so important. Maria's here. Dwight's here. Yep, got to be cool, calm, and collected. People read you. It's just like in poker, they say good players play the cards, great players play the people, you know, and you got to be able to read all the people around the table. Then personal features and benefits are so important, connecting with the audience. Leslie's here. Leslie's here. Everything is fine. Hello and good morning, friends. Leslie will be back tomorrow with Catherine. They're turning out to be a great duo. So pleased to be with them also. Zen says, taking a deep dive, poking holes prior, then shoring them up with relevant solutions for punctuate. You know, there's no dumb questions. And if anybody challenges you because you didn't know something, you asked something, that's a red flag right there.
Yes.
You know, you're the person. Start now, regardless of circumstances. So well said. And I was just mentioning, Leslie, about your aptitude for Napoleon Hill, and we had a little story there. So grateful for that. Zen says, speaking of assets, a new category emerged recently, natural asset company. You know, and things are changing, and that's when a company has to understand. There's money out there. These people looking to deploy money. They're in the business of having to,
Yep.
right? The question is, do you relate to value for them? Because so many people are thinking, what's in it for me? I need this for this and my stuff. But how strong and valuable do you appear?
Mm-hmm.
And I think to Kelly's point and Carl's, you got to do due diligence. I mean, to cut the failure rate, see what, you know, just look at what do they invest in, right? If you're a retail company and they say no retail, that's probably a good company not to address. You know, what size companies do they deal with? What kind of amounts? There's so much intricacies to this, and that's another reason why having a financial intermediary who's been in the marketplace. You know, it's like people try to sell their house and they get 20% less and they saved a commission, you know, and it was penny wise and pound foolish. Elizabeth says awareness has become more powerful today. You know, you have more access to information than ever. You know, and financial information. Before you had to go to the library or you had to know somebody. I thought you were off Saturdays. Yeah, that was 1 week. No, I'm sorry. It's Labor Day, no soccer. Next week they're going to a music festival, no soccer. So when they're not here, I'm here. Elizabeth, place value for sure. So Kelly.
Yeah, I think, you know, the due diligence thing to me is just super important, right? I mean, me working particularly in the broker dealer channel, there was different layers of, and due diligence is a process. And to kind of go off of what you said, Don, about asking questions, and there is no stupid question. The reason that people need a Carl or a financial advisor or something else, you're not going to know what to ask a lot of the times. I think, you know, and all the experience that I've had over the years, also on the financial advisor side and on the capital market side, is you put a PPM in front of someone, private placement memorandum, which is usually about an offering to raise capital for a specific product. People have no idea what to do with that thing. It's that onion paper. It's 200 pages of legalese that you cannot cannot distinguish what the heck are they actually saying in here, and what fees are going where, and what am I actually investing in, and what are the risks, because there's so many risks. And I say all that just to go back to the whole point of, you need somebody that you can go to, because I think so many people don't even know what to ask. And that doesn't make anyone stupid or any of those things. It's just, it is nuanced and it is so layered and it is very complex. It's not as easy as I think whenever I see someone go, oh, the easiest way for you to raise capital. And it's like, oh gosh, that smells to high heaven to me for whatever reason. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. And again, I'll go with both of you on that. The due diligence part is huge, and understanding even what that entails and what it means. So with that part of me being said, I will toss it back over to Carl.
Well, I'm going to agree with everything Kelly said, but I'm going to flip it on its head 180 degrees.
Love it.
Kelly is talking about the need to dig deep and look at what's behind the company prospectus. What's I'll call it the spin on top of the sales pitch.
Yes.
But if I'm the business, if you recognize the fact that if you sell one share of equity in your company to an investor, you may have forced a lifetime relationship with that person because they may be owning that share for the rest of your life, the rest of the company's life. So you should be doing due diligence on each investor. You should be asking yourself, is this someone I want to be married to? Do they work well in a polygamy where I've got 1,000 investors and they all have their own agendas? Can they work with everybody? And again, back to the earlier point that if you put yourself out there as a company and you say, hey, I can give you a rate of return of say 14 or 15%, at that point, your company looks like a commodity to the investor because every other business who offers 14 or 15% looks just like yours. So you've got to talk to that person who's the investor and go, what else can I give you? What other benefit can you give? How can I accentuate you? Because if I'm going to be married to you for a long time, I want you to be happy. And so you really need to know your investor and their background and what they want to do, short, long term. What really fits up for them.
Yeah, and I think that's, this is an important area for your business. And the other thing is you got to understand, are these long-term investors, short-term investors? Because they've got their timetable. They're not always going to believe in your dream. They're looking to get a return on their investment. If they can do it faster and do it greater, they'll leave. Mm-hmm. And, the other thing is people that you got to know may not always be there, right? So there could have been a VC or a private equity guy who was just somebody you admired, somebody with so much honesty. They move to another company, someone takes over their role. All of a sudden, it's a different person. And the other thing is I think a lot of people get too caught up in the documentation. Where they're reading every line and the lawyers are just making out like bandits, they just love, let's change this, let's adjust this because it just, and there's money being exchanged. So lawyers know that, there's a premium to their services. Mm-hmm. And what I learned, I had that wonderful relationship with Fred Erb. And when we started it, he had his lawyer come in, we made the deal. And they were just going back and forth, and I was just sitting there like a bump on a log. And for some reason, they came up with something, the piggyback clause. And I said, can you explain what that is to me? He says, well, if this happens, then they can do this, and blah, and Fred could do this. And somehow I said, well, I'd like one of those in my agreement. And you could hear a pin drop. And they both stopped what they were talking about, and they looked at me. And I remember Fred saying, hey, Don, listen, Ira's here. He can do anything with documents. But I'll tell you one thing. This is just to identify our understanding. There isn't enough paper in the world that's going to save you if I don't want to do something with you, But I will tell you one thing is whatever is needed to be done, I will do it in the future to make it right if we don't know what's right here. And I apologized up and down. I said, I'm so sorry. I just got caught up. I don't want anything that you don't say is the right way to do things, right? And we completed it. And, over every year, he kept making adjustments, and he did take care of me on the financial side. A lot of it was testing, would you do it? And you say, yeah, and then he feels sorry for you. How's the family? How's this? How's that? And, we became really close friends for 12 years. And it turned out, like I say, he was like a billionaire. And I never knew it until a little bit later on. And I knew he didn't get that way by not helping people because he was, it was all from scratch. He started with a lumber yard in Royal Oak, Michigan, and built it up into this wonderful company. By the way, he was a tough taskmaster, but by the way, he would always make things right for everybody, and that was what was important. And I think that's so key. So before we turn it back over, let's go back to Boy, these things are just coming in pretty quick. Let's start here. Hope I connection will always work but folks from this platform also just sent an invite while looking at the profile. I always am intentional about inviting and connecting. And it's so important, Maria, because to Kelly's point, what I learned is relevance and importance is so much better than numbers. And I'm not just saying that, I've got 37,000 connections. I've got 11,000 people on a newsletter. I mean, I've got numbers, and I realize because I have them how unbeneficial they are in different circumstances and situations. Because right now, if I could press a button and have 100 connections and see the other 37,000 disappear, I would, because it wouldn't complicate my feed. It would be focused just on that, right? And I think what I learned about this program after a year is it's the program, it's the knowledge coming from it, because this continues beyond this audience. It moves into the future audience, right? And the value of what we're saying will have much more value than 300 comments that weren't very relevant to 30. We're getting 3, 4, 5, 6 line comments now. And, if you had a boardroom, would you want 400 people yelling and screaming? You'd like to have the top 15 sharing their advice and getting their time. So less of less creates more of the more, if one can appreciate that. Zen says curiosity sparks innovation. Well, who you're with motivates you. If you got great financial partners, you got people who are excited, that gets you excited, and you want people to ratchet off of each other. They know things are going to get tough. They know there's going to be surprises. What they want to see is how you respond. Like I say, the most deflating thing is walking into General's tent and seeing him with his head in his hands crying, right? That's not going to motivate you to go off and fight really hard tomorrow. Ashief says find and or create right synergies. And that's the key word, create, do, be proactive. Every question has an answer. Are we asking the right ones? Perhaps asking about what question we ought to be asking is a good springboard for the deep dive. And getting rid of your tunnel vision, opening it up to say, here's what I got. What do you see here that I don't see? What can we do with this that I'm not able to do? So it's really complementing and optimizing, not just flipping it around and making you feel like nothing works. Seek expert advice from Think and Grow Rich in the principle of organized planning. Leslie's on a roll. That sounds way beyond my dreams for business. All that work, yes to the money. However, I prefer simple. Different stages, different situations, different confidence levels. And, the benefit you have is if it's easier and everybody thinks it is, you've got an advantage, right? Because just like LinkedIn Lives, people think this is so difficult and it is if you've never done it. But once you jump on, it's like, hey, it's like meeting at Starbucks in front of a lot of people. Do we ask what's their purpose-driven objective? Leslie says Zen benefit. Yes, definite purpose is first and foremost. Actually, Leslie, I met Zen by going to your LinkedIn audio event. And I think that's another benefit. I can't have a show without mentioning Kelly and Christy's awesome journey Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. Eastern time. I want to also give a shout out to Gretchen Skalka. She has the plight attendant Tuesday mornings, I believe an hour before mine. And she's just a wonderful individual. And here's the other thing about these connections. They know other people. They may not be, and they're usually not the person. They're not the client. They're not the investor, but they now know people like Carl, like Kelly, and have learned a little bit. Oh, I didn't know Kelly was in financial markets. I didn't know Carl was doing these things. Once you know, you're giving people more vowels to solve the puzzle. You don't want to be, the best kept secret here. MOUs are underutilized opportunities. Zen, boy, you already did Tuesday before even coming on Tuesday. When things aren't always easy as part of the process of success. People look at you on how you react to them, thinking that's how you're going to react to other people, right? And being honest, I'll tell you one thing: if you're dealing with finance, Integrity is so key. And the thing I always learned, get in front of something before you get behind it, right? Because the question is always going to know not what happened. When did you know?
Mm-hmm.
When did you let us know? Because that tells you what kind of partnership we have,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is either you include us or you should have thought about that. And I'll tell you one thing, there's risk to bringing in the wrong people or
Oh.
being the wrong people for other people, because things can happen really fast, really sudden, and they know everything in those documents because they typically created them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they know where the triggers are and what they can do. So the idea is don't ever think you're too good and everybody needs you that bad, because I will tell you too, some people don't always act on what's best financially. There's a lot of principle-based people.
So true.
You know, and a lot of people say, I don't care if I take a hit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if this is blah, 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 and then you got to ask yourself, do you want to fight two battles at the same time? With that, I forgot who we go to, but let's defer to Carl because he's our
Yeah.
guest. Carl, you got such a great smile. I'd invest money with you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'll send you 10 or 12 opportunities after the show.
I love it.
Said, no, I want to follow up on your comment. You're talking about piggybacks and attorneys, and I actually am an attorney, and I love attorney jokes. I just heard some good ones yesterday. But the point is that when you get a relationship with an investor as a small business, a lot of people think that the investor's sole skill in life is to sign the check, and yet the thing is, they are their own resource. And I tell people, I said, don't just accept the money and then kind of forget that your investor exists. You should be transparent to the nth degree. You want to share everything that's going on. And yeah, the roller coaster is going to happen. Your business is going to have its bad days. And when it does, you'd like for your investor to go, hey, I can help you with that. I know somebody, as you described it, somebody in my network knows exactly how to fix that problem. But if I'm not talking with them, if I'm not sharing with them, then I'm the sole person that has to handle that particular problem. And that defeats kind of the whole purpose of having all those investors. You're like, wow, if they know all these people and they have all these other skills and resources, I should be using them as my own asset. And too many small businesses just fail to do that.
A huge point on the being transparent part. I have so much experience with seeing people not doing that properly. But a good example that I can use, one of the organizations that I worked with for quite a while was basically land banking. And it happened during the downturn after the real estate crash in 2007-8. And very large plots of land in all the sunshine states, basically in the U.S. And the hold periods for a lot of the investments, of course, then when the market changed a little bit later, they needed to be adjusted, because now it's like, oh, we said 4 to 7 years was the estimated hold period, but now it's looking more like it's going to be 10 to 12. But it was fascinating to me because the president of the organization, which I had a huge amount of respect for and learned so much from, is we then started a national plan for him to go out and do presentations in regional areas to bring as many investors as we could. We did online, but a lot of in person, because in person matters to people, especially when it's talking about money. But he would tell all these people, like, these hold periods have changed and explain why and go through. People loved him. It was like they just got bad news. Like, hey, guess what? You're not going to get return on your investment for another decade. And not that there's not a risk in real estate to begin with, but it was just interesting to watch as an observer, to watch how people responded to it. Nobody got mad. I mean, I honestly feel out of the thousands of people that he did speak to during that time period, there was maybe one or two that got like angry, and they were usually a child of the actual investor, which I also thought was funny. I'm like, oh my God, you're worried about your inheritance already? Like, your parents are still on this side of the dirt, man. Come on. But just transparency is key. And when you feel that something is off, I also say trust it. Especially when you're working with anything like that. There's definitely been times with me personally that I'm like, I don't know what smells here, but something does not smell right, and I don't want to be a part of it. Trust those things, and it goes back to the whole thing of the people and the trust and who you're working with. Because when money starts coming into the picture, it changes everything. Just think about the friend that we've all had that we lent the money to, and then we felt like the idiots for having to go, or we felt uncomfortable having to say, "Hey, remember that $300 I lent you? When are you going to start paying me back?" It's so uncomfortable, but trust those feelings. I think it's just such a complex thing. But since we're here on LinkedIn, having a connection like a Carl to be able to ask those questions, I mean, truly is a gift. And to be able to ask the question of, hey, I don't even know what to ask or how to begin, but I'm interested in, being an opportunity that you would pitch to someone as an example. So those are my thoughts right now. Don, what do you think?
They're excellent thoughts, and the beauty of them, they're based on real experience, real education that we had to learn the hard way too. And everything that works one way also works the other way. And I've been involved with investors that weren't very transparent with me,
Yes.
that had things going on that weren't being disclosed, actually talking in ways that shouldn't have been, right?
Mhm.
And then it's hard to sit back at the table, and usually what happens then is we're going to figure a way to get you out of here.
Mhm.
Right? How much is it going to take you to pay you off? Because if you're doing well and you are a good person, there's a point where you say, hey, it's not going to benefit you, and it's not going to benefit the company or me anymore.
Mhm.
And usually that's a good opportunity to pivot,
Mm.
right? Or make a decision, because at a certain point, everybody is as valuable as they are today, right? And if you have no value, you're better off finding it out sooner than later, right? In other words, you can say, yeah, it was like this, but now we got to rewrite that area for me to stay here, right? Or I'm not going to present myself as a representative of this type of strategy,
Mhm.
because there are some people who will cut corners, even risk, knowing there's a risk with the hope they won't get caught or they'll get their money out soon. I mean, it's all this weird stuff, because at the end of the day, it's people and it's money and people.
Mhm.
People are hard enough. Money's hard enough. You put the two together, and either you got a tailwind that can drive and fly you to places you never could have done on your own, or you got a headwind that you got to run a business and keep the wolves from the door, and know that you need to figure out, as soon as you take that money, a way of giving it back, because that's what their thinking is, right? You can't think they're going to be there forever, because if they call the money, and there's different triggers and based on banks and who knows what, there's a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Be with friendly people who who you care about, and who give you more with the money than less with the money. So let me run through some more of these. We'll turn it right back to Carl. Things move pretty quickly here. Okay, it's part of that. Let me go right down to here. Zen says, if you're not transparent, the rest of the story isn't available. There's no interaction capacity. Plus, it shows you who you are as a business person, who are you as a person, because it's going to project through your organization. It's going to duplicate.
Mhm.
They say the fish always rots from the head down, or whatever it is. And after a while, you want to feel good about who you're with and what you're doing. And if you just get a feeling like this is so crazy here, it's not fun. How we investigate ongoing trends that seem ancillary are still important in the overall view. Information takes time to resolve. And even in business, you have partners. You have your VP of finance or CFO. You've got your general managers. I mean, they should be involved, because they are going to be involved. And that's the thing. If you're going to be full disclosure, everybody involved with you needs to know what's about to happen, because first of all, they didn't have any ownership in the decision. They were not recognized as being important enough or trusted. And either way, what you did is you might have swapped one solid, loyal group with a brand new bunch of strangers who are going to come in and act like they own the business too. And I've had those investors too who would call up my CFO without talking to me. You know, can you furnish this information? It's like, no, he's working for the company, you know, and why would you put a conflict in it? You know, and a lot of times it's just ignorance and clumsiness. I mean, it's not like if they were smart enough, they wouldn't have done it. How we investigate the ongoing trends, are still important. And overall, information takes time. I think we covered that. Renadep comes in with capital is a versatile word with various meanings depending on the context in which it is used. It changes by the day. It changes by the event. It's sad the number of people pretending on many media's integrity and transparency of who really are is harder long distance, even sometimes in person. Breaks my heart of scams occurring around. That's a good point, Linda, because it used to be your neighborhood, right? If you were in Denver, you basically lived and worked and were influenced by Colorado. Now there is no boundaries. Now there is so many different ways to raise money, and there's so many ways not to have to do it in a complicated manner that cost a lot. Mm-hmm. Because now access to capital has never been greater, and different forms of capital. So really what you need is to figure out where you fit and then have, like you say, an audience. Last point before I turn it back over is have a marketplace. If you don't create a marketplace and everybody knows they're the only game in town and you're just negotiating with yourself after a certain point, you know, versus if you have 2-3 other companies and you could say, hey, we're talking to these 3 people, then there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of value because only one's going to get it. And then you see what the stretch will be, you know, and a lot of times it may not be better terms, but it might be, hey, we're going to bring a person in to help you with your location search, right? If you're a retailer or something, we know somebody who's great at warehousing and can get you more efficient, whatever it is. It's like, I think Carl made the greatest point. It's a marriage, right? How you get into it and how your honeymoon is and how long is a good example, because eventually everybody's going to say, well, give me the numbers. I mean, we're talking finance, we're talking financial people. I mean, we love you, we like you, you're great, but hey, you know, the numbers got to shine. Mm-hmm. Renadep says most commonly capital refers to the wealth of an individual or an organization. So true. Elizabeth, it would be wonderful to approach our former spouse for money that was lost and owed. Hey, do you remember? Yeah, what's done is done. Power, money. Yeah, people forget really quick when it passes. You know, the marketplace, Jim Rohn, and I love Jim Rohn. There's so much to it, and why deprive yourself of somebody like a Carl who can get you up to scratch? You know, I mean, if he had a serious issue, you'd go to a financial advisor, you go to a lawyer, you go to a doctor, or you go to Google and find out where that doctor or that lawyer is, and give yourself the chance to have a team player. Because here's another thing I learned. The reason people invest is because your core competency, right? They want you to focus on what you do best, where you bring the most value, and not be focused on looking for investors, creating presentations. I mean, I remember doing road shows and everything was orchestrated. You had so many minutes to do this, you know, we'll do all the financial stuff. You don't mention a number unless you're 100% sure. Mm-hmm. You get back to people if you don't know. Because one screw up is like, well, they were off on this, maybe mm-hmm. they're off on more. And, you know, it shows that you're human, you know, and you have to admit it isn't a bed of roses. You know, every time you create an investment, you got to show your risk factors just for liability issues, right? So if you don't disclose everything, it could come back to bite you. And again, it's like, well, you knew, we could have, you didn't let us. You know, and your excuses start to get like very diluted. And in that marriage, all we truly want is to love and be loved. Growth is the result of it happening. And there's so many businesses who can relate to their investment advisor, to the financial people that came in at the right time and gave them that opportunity. So it is, it's give and take. Anthony says lots of us see complementary partnerships aligned to more altruistic goals and are not profit driven. I'm not the only one that says no to 99% of proposals that come across my table. Astronomical margins won't get my attention. A good margin that he says with a great mission will. And then Zen, Googling is like tickling the universe. You never know what we're That's a good one, Zen. I can't wait in person on Tuesday. I mean, this hour goes like zip, 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 and we're almost there. We are there. With that said, Zen, I'm not Zen. I'm sorry, Carl. Why don't you share your thoughts on an hour later from your initial thoughts and what you can leave the wonderful audience with?
I would just close with, again, that a relationship with an investor, any source of capital, which can include your employees and everyone, all your vendors, suppliers, all your contractors, this is basically your network. And they're all investing in you in some degree because they're willing to work with you. They're putting their endorsement of the fact they're related to you by services or whatever else. And it's a give and take relationship. You have this wonderful group of people that is invaluable to the success of your organization. So use it. Reach out to these people. Don't just take something and then go on about your business. Reach back to them, tell them what you're doing. If you have a problem, let them solve it for you if they can. Because at the end of the day, you're not the smartest person on the planet, despite your best efforts, and you need all the help you can get.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing so much today of so much value. And what's interesting about the conversation is it brought everybody to the table about something that was more financial. Usually it's about attitude or being more upbeat, but it's really the exchange that people want to see. They want to see Kelly talking about this, Kelly talking about that. Carl now being a financial person. The other day, we had a naval retiree. And what's so beneficial is their experience, their story. They say facts tell, stories sell. No one wants to hear the numbers. They want to hear the context. They want to hear the vision. They want to buy into a passion that they can take a ride with. And hopefully they get a good return on their investment. But, I always told people who came to work for me, it's not how much you make, it's who you become. When you get a relationship with an investment group, maybe you could have got better, maybe it didn't work out as well, but did you have a fun ride? Did the people save you some stress and some headaches? One thing as a CEO, I remember I'd be 4 or 5 in the morning looking at the ceiling saying 2 hours, I got to come up with an idea I haven't been able to. When you have other people working on your behalf, you say, I hope Carl's thinking of something I haven't been able to figure out, or somebody else is up at night too. And I think being lonely is really just, again, another headwind on progress in a company because it reflects, your mood, you're so important to help the organization understand the mission, and the beauty about plans is exceed them. Don't just make them. Build projections that are attainable, that are based on lower hanging fruit, because it's the first couple months, the first 6 months of progress and momentum that confirms what the deal was getting into it. After that, if things go a little hairy, then everybody knows at least everything was starting at a good point, and making access so available that they tell you, I've got enough board meetings with you or Zoom calls. You're doing just fine, but at least you could say I offered, include them in everything if you want. Dennis says, thanks for the great power hour. And I love talking deeper about subjects. And I know what's shifting, and that's why I'm so happy to have Kelly, is because Kelly's such a good proponent, a new guest, and having them share more of their voice. We're not we say we go round robin, but Dennis and people like Ashif and our guests like Carl, have so much more stories that we don't have anymore, right? You've gotten to know us pretty well. So it's nice to share that partnership. And finally, with Zen, before I turn it over to Kelly, phenomenal information shared here today, Carl and Kelly. I'm out of connection requests. Thanks so much, Don. You're leading a great trend of building community. It's having a voice. And I think when you're talking about capital, your voice needs to be heard by more than less, needs to be more concise and understandable, because you don't want to cast a huge net and then have to filter everything that could have filtered itself out. And then learning from every experience and growing from it. And sharing your inadequacies, your deficiencies, with the financial person. So there's no sense keeping them in the dark, because that's just going to replicate. So Kelly, what's your thought? An hour of Carl and
yeah, again, fastest hour of my life. Because of course I could continue to talk about it. I of course the Google tickling the universe, like I can't help, that is so funny. But when it comes to financial, and then this is how I'll wrap up. I tell people, don't use Google. Like, there's so many nuances and layers that you will never really know. And some of the information you get back, although true, it may not be all the information you need. And that is why you need a Carl in your life. So I do recommend and remind everyone in the chat, not only to connect with each other, but do be sure to reach out to Carl and connect. And as I always end on, I want everyone just to go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It's just amazing every time you're here. And it makes this hour the best hour of my day, because it's a learning hour, it's a sharing hour, it's a growing hour, and you've got 40, 50 people firing at each other, in like a circular firing squad that's firing quality, valuable to everybody. And we always talk, Kelly, if one or two persons in the audience, and I know there's more, get a takeaway that changes their life in even a small way to make it better, our hour was well spent. Yeah. And I think that's the motivation, is invest in others, invest in other stories. And it doesn't take capital of money. It takes a little time, a little thought, a little, and I think yesterday was a great day where our guests were sharing. I've always got 15 minutes for any deserving person, right? So if anybody contacts me and says, I read your article, I loved your video, I learned so much, I got a question, or I'd love to talk to you for 15 minutes, I challenge you to find somebody who wouldn't say yes. And again, I'm like 97%, maybe there's 3% who wouldn't, but look at all the ones who would. And sometimes before you have to actually acquire somebody like Carl, you can interview so many people along the way, just out of education, just out of curiosity. We had Tracy Riley, who was a great insurance person and shared so much about insurance today and how you can benefit and protect yourself. And who knows, maybe someone took care of their family that day in a way they weren't aware of. That can turn out to be life-changing. So with that, come back in 23 hours. We've got Leslie Flowers with Catherine Chadwick. It's going to, I believe the word is contribution, which kind of lends itself to capital. So thank you very much. A little over, but it is weekend. So have a wonderful Labor Day. Don't eat too many hot dogs and hamburgers, and get ready for Monday and Tuesday. So thank you. Appreciate it.